Hey everybody, this is Eleanors Mills. For those who don't know me, this is my Sunday Queenager newsletter. Everything I do is about trying to change the story that we tell about the later stages of women's lives and what we're for to something more positive and optimistic and fit for purpose, in my view. If you'd like to read the newsletter rather than have me read it to you here, then go to noon.org.uk and sign up, and then it'll be sent to you directly rather than through Substack. What we do on Substack here is to read it out, because some of you say you like to hear it being listened to, but I know some of you would actually rather read it, so in which case go to noon.org.uk. So here we are. This is my Queenager newsletter for February the 22nd. And it's the tale of three Queenager heroes of mine, really. Antonia Romeo, who was made the Chief Cabinet Secretary, first woman ever this week. Gisèle Pelicot, who you all know about. And Samantha Cameron. So here it goes. Dear Queenagers, I hope you've had a good week. I found myself unexpectedly moved by Wuthering Heights, which I saw just the other night, which was our Noon Pro outing this week. It was so beautiful, sumptuous costumes, incredible landscapes, such a powerful love story. And who could argue with Margot Robbie, Martin Clunes, and the chap tipped to be the next James Bond, Jason Elordi as Heathcliff. The film has had some damning reviews, but we all liked it. We sat in a row at the Soho Picture House, and I thought it was going to be a bit 50 Shades of Grey, but it really wasn't. And actually, I love Emerald Fennell. I thought it was beautifully directed. So yes, it's kind of based on Wuthering Heights, the novel, rather than totally faithful to the plot. But, you know, a bit of artistic license is a good thing. The cinema was full of women, lots of them Queenagers. And I suppose that's not really that surprising. Men like Marvel and football. My husband's downstairs listening to the cricket. Why shouldn't we enjoy 2.5 hours of pure escapist romance and beauty in the Yorkshire Dales? And in terms of steaminess, seediness, our view was it was a lot less embarrassing than Bridgerton. And I watched Wuthering Heights with my 82-year-old mother. She was there as one of the party. I actually thought it was really beautiful, so do go. I want to write this week about three amazing Queenagers: Samantha Cameron, Dame Antonia Romeo, and Gisèle Pelicot. I have to say that the highlight of my week, other than Wuthering Heights, was going to the closing clearance sample sale of one of my favourite clothes brands, Sefin, I never know how to pronounce it. And it was set up by Samantha Cameron, wife of, that David Cameron, who used to be also the creative director of Smythson. And Sefin was her Queenager dream. I first came across Sefin as a clothes label, when I was photographed by the Daily Mail. They serialised my book, and they gave me a kind of shoot from the Mail to publicise it. Now, for those of you who've never done a kind of professional photo shoot, it is really weird. They give you a kind of wind machine to make your hair look tousled. There was a crew of hair and makeup people to kind of try and make you look beauteous, and a rack of clothes, most of which were really not my cup of tea. The newspapers have a kind of particular look for their case studies, so they put everybody into those horrid colour block kind of frock dresses, very kind of Fox newsreader. There was a lot of Bode and a lot of things I don't really wear on the rail, because all the papers want to make you look like someone that their readers could relate to. They hated my green nails. They said the readers wouldn't like them. But on the rail, the best thing I saw there was a rather beautiful blue silk dress, which I put on. It was Sefin, which I kind of knew about as SamCam's label, but I had never really worn. And I was just super impressed by it. It was blue, it hung beautifully, it was super flattering, it was made out of the most lovely silk. I have to say I liked it so much that I went out and bought a version of it in my favourite green to wear to my daughter's graduation. And after that, I decided that I would have a look at Sefin, because I do quite a lot of public speaking and things, so I need some smart clothes sometimes. And I started going to their sample sales, because they're quite expensive. And what I found on Wednesday was that I'm really not the only Queenager who loves SamCam's designs. I got to Bond Street to the final sale because she's shutting the label down. And I got there at like 12:55. It was starting at 1. and the queue was round the block. We had to queue for 45 minutes just to get in, during which I chatted to loads of the Queenagers around me. One had come all the way from Devon, and she was saying she just loved the Sefton clothes because they made her feel so elegant and confident. And it was really sweet. All around us, women were wearing their things from the label. This is actually a Sefton shirt. There's a lady wearing a sweater dress from last year. Lots of her trademark sleeveless jumpers. I've got three, I have to say. I've got a navy, black and a cream. I just find her clothes super wearable. And the sample scale was great. I got a long leather skirt for 30 quid, reduced from 400, and an amazing sequin party dress, green, which I was actually slipped into by SamCam herself. She was there overseeing what must have been one of the poshest jumble sales in history. It was a huge room full of Queenagers, kind of in tights or their bare legs, trying on silk dresses and velvet trousers, party frocks, day dresses, all desperate to nab a bargain because everything had to go. But what was really interesting was they thought they'd do it over 2 days, and it was so popular that everything had sold out within about 2 hours. And I sat down and chatted to Sam about why she was closing down and said to her how proud she should feel because all those women there obviously so loved what she'd done and how she made them feel. And I really asked her why it was that she was shutting it down, because she's an incredible Queenager. And so I really wanted to know, this was her Queenager dream, this business. So I wondered why she was shutting down. I mean, I think probably the economics of the business weren't really working, but she said that it was stressful and exhausting and that she really needed a break and that she just wasn't really sure that she could go on doing it for another 5 years. She said how happy she was to have fulfilled her dream of running this business. She'd always wanted to own her own fashion label ever since she was a girl. And she was almost teary, actually, about how much the ladies loved what she'd done and how they made her feel. I just said to her, your clothes really are magic and you've done something amazing. Because she was a rare fashion designer who truly saw midlife women like us. She loves us and she really wants us to feel good about ourselves in her clothes. I gave her a hug. We know each other a bit from my former life. I once profiled her for the Sunday Times magazine. And I've always been a big admirer of her. I think it's jolly hard to have such a successful husband and a very successful entrepreneur mother. And I said I thought she should feel really proud of what she'd created and the pleasure that she'd spread. And I really love a Queenager who goes for her dream, particularly when it's an entrepreneurial one. And there really is another equally important lesson here, which is it's also really important to know when to quit, when to know when our passion or the dream that we had is no longer serving us. Like many of us, Sam has had her own midlife collision. She said she got a kid doing GCSEs. David Cameron's very publicly had prostate cancer. She was running a big business in a very tricky market. Fashion's really polarised at the moment, so that the very luxury stuff is profitable and the very cheap kind of sheen stuff. But in the middle, lots of good brands are going out of business, which is just such a shame because someone like Cam and Sefton really did see midlife women. It's funny, when I wear Sefton, I always feel kind of cool and comfortable and on top of my game. They're made, the material that she uses is fantastic. It's never sweaty and they really last. I'll be wearing them for years. So I really enjoy Sam enjoys her sabbatical. She's a grafter, so I know this won't be her last throw of the dice. But also well done her for creating such an amazing and much loved label and also knowing when to stop. And it must have been really hard to throw in the towel so publicly, but I think she should feel really proud. Another Queenager in the news this week, and actually another one I know, was Dame Antonia Romeo, who's been appointed the first ever woman to be cabinet secretary in 110 years. Now that really is quite a moment. Hooray! I wrote a column about it in the Telegraph. There's a gift link at the bottom of here. About how her appointment is partly an attempt by Starmer to stop the kind of boys' club inside Number 10 and to bring in some more women. And he's been under a lot of pressure from the kind of parliamentary Labour Party to do that. But I also was really struck by the incredible misogyny around Romeo's appointment. Before she was even she announced in the job, there was an absolutely horrid kind of smear campaign by all the kind of men at the top of the civil service who obviously didn't want her to get the job. They dug out an ancient investigation into her expenses when she was the Consul General in New York back in about 2017 and accused her of bullying, which was a charge which had been thoroughly looked into and found to be totally groundless at the time. And, you know, we've all worked with bullies, which is horrible, but that's not Antonia. So it made me really think about the double standard around ambition for women. You know, Antonia is ambitious. She's super bright. She's hilarious. She's definitely got an eye on the prize. You know, full disclosure, she's a bit of a mate. We both went to Westminster as girls in the sixth form, which I have to say I think was a great preparation for dealing with the male British establishment. You really learn to see them, look them in the eye, and know how to deal with them as a teenage girl. And then she also went to Brasenose College, Oxford, like me. She's always been hyper ambitious, but I think that a very ambitious and successful man would never face the obstacles that she did. She was really bitched about for liking designer dresses. I mean, why shouldn't you have a nice frock if you're a successful woman? She had an expensive watch, and all sorts of people had to go at her for wearing a Rolex or something equivalent, whereas I've never seen a man attacked for having an expensive watch. And when she left, her colleagues mocked up a picture of her on the cover of Vogue because she's such a fashionista. She absolutely loves her fashion. And again, she was really, really attacked for that. So I just think that there's a real double standard around women in the public eye as opposed to men. And also there were all these men kind of saying, oh, she should be looked at for kind of, you know, her kind of behavioural style, which I think is just because they're not used to women being forceful. One of the ministers that she'd worked with said how good she was always to kind of standing up for him, even if she put other people's noses a bit out of joint. And if we're going to be successful in the world, you can't always be pleasing. And there's a real contrast there between, I think, how men are seen and how women are seen. So I really kind of congratulate Antonia for having got to that point and for getting the job. And she knows she's been wanting it for a long time. And also it's incredible that in 2026 she is the first one. I mean, that really is a huge achievement. Anyway, if you'd like to read the column I wrote for it in the Telegraph, which I'm proud to say was puffed on the front page, it's free here on a gift link. And my final incredible Queenager of the week is Gisèle Pelicot. If you haven't seen the interview that she did with Victoria Derbyshire on Newsnight, I really, really would recommend that you did. I thought it might be quite grim. Actually, it wasn't grim at all. It was incredibly inspiring about her. I love her line about how shame should change sides, that it's the men who should be feeling shame because of what they did. You know, this is the woman who was raped by her husband and all sorts of people while she was asleep. And she was also incredibly impressive in terms of her bravery, her composure, and her lack of bitterness. There's a wonderful part of the interview when she's shown a series of vox pops with French women talking about how the impact that she's had, how hers taking the stand has emboldened women everywhere to call out sexual abuse. If you haven't watched the interview yet, please do. She truly is an icon. I think this is how we begin to turn the tide on sexual violence against women, with firmness, with dignity, with putting the blame back where it belongs, on the perpetrators. And I think it's really important that the rest of us as women kind of support her. You know, we should watch that interview. We should really take on board what she says, because she's right that it's only through putting the shame on the men and through being kind of, you know, dignified and kind of grown up about how we talk about it, that we begin to change this narrative. And I think that people will look back at this point as a really important pivot in the way that we think about sexual violence. The other book I'm reading at the moment is Virginia Giuffre's memoir, which I have to say is quite a tough read. But again, if she could go through all of that ghastliness at the hands of Epstein and the others around him, it's a really important portrait of that world, then we should be able to steel ourselves to actually read her book. I really recommend, and I think it's important that we do. But anyway, another more positive news, if you'd like to come along to a noon thing, we launched our trip to Luxor last week. We've already sold 15 places. There's only 20 on the trip, so if you want to come, really do get on with that, noon.org.uk for the details. And we've also got a whole load of March and February. I'm doing a circle in London next week, which I think is sold out, but there are a whole load of March circles if you'd like to come along. And the other thing is we've got 2 Wazing retreats this summer. That's where we go to the incredible Wazing estate in Berkshire. It's just near Reading off the M4. and we have the run of their 3,000 acres of this most beautiful estate. There's a wonderful lake with a sauna. We do lunch, we do yoga, we go for a walk through the woods, we all sit in the sauna. It's really good fun, lots of laughs always. And lovely Leslie, who I used to work with, comes and does the yoga, and we just really have a fantastic day. So if you've been thinking about coming along to a Noon thing, weren't sure what to do, or don't fancy a circle, or can't spend a whole week doing a trip, come along to a Ways In retreat. It's just one day. It's not expensive, and that would give you a real sense of what we're trying to do here. So have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for spending this time with me this morning. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing some of you at anything soon. Take care. And remember, if you'd rather read these in future, or you want to hear about us at Noon, it's www.noon, as in the middle of the day, .org.uk. And I'm Eleanors Mills. Thanks. Bye.